The protests have continued in Iran, and unfortunately, they have been met with so much violence from authorities that the death toll has increased. So far, we know that at least 21 people have died as a result of these protests, and there have been hundreds, if not more, arrests. In fact, in Tehran alone, there have been about 450 arrests. So what we know so far is that the government of Iran is clamping down on these protesters by using violent force. We also know that they are shutting down social media and even encrypted communication among individuals in the country in an effort to squash these protests. Now, the Ayatollah has released a statement in regard to these protests, and he believes that there are some conspiratorial forces at play. So let me give you his statement. He says, during the escapades of the past several days, Iran's enemies, using the various tools at their disposal, including money, weapons, politics, and security apparatus, have allied with one another to create problems for the Islamic establishment. Now, he wasn't specific about the players at hand. However, we do know that there is some suspicion that this is a Saudi-led effort, and we also know that the United States is allied with the Saudis in regard to Iran and the danger that it poses to the world. At least that's the message that they continuously send out. So in addition to providing military support for Damascus against Syrian rebels who receive backing from Gulf states, Tehran is providing aid to Houthis in Yemen who are fighting Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, to kind of show you what the conflict is there, just to give you some context of why it is that the Ayatollah would think that there are foreign forces at play here.
So let's talk about both sides of this issue. So first of all, I have to confess to being a little annoyed by the mainstream news coverage of this. They're not stating anything wrong. They're just leaving out a decent sized chunk of the story. They're even pointing out, hey, they got a conflict with Saudi Arabia and Yemen. But the New York Times, for example, said that the demonstrations came, quote, largely seemed to come out of nowhere. Well, okay, look, I get it. I think that they're meaning it wasn't like there was just a corrupt election or we just found out a piece of news. But at the same time, it's not out of nowhere. I mean, it was a lot of your own reporting about Saudi Arabia that we covered on the show, that the Saudis were trying to foment an uprising in the case of Hezbollah, against Hezbollah. They did it with Palestinians. They tried to get Sunni jihadists to fight against the Shia influence, and even the jihadists were like, that's crazy, dog, we're not gonna do that. And then all of a sudden, as Saudi Arabia is going around doing all this throughout the Middle East and is in a war with the Shia in the form of the Houthis in Yemen that Iran is backing, all of a sudden there is demonstrations against Iran. And so, look, I'm not saying that the New York Times should say it's definitively because of that. I'm saying that we know that those are factors. You know those are factors. You should be a little bit more clear about that. So instead, when Khamenei says this might be foreign forces, it makes it look insane. And I've got 1,000 problems with the Ayatollah, and I got no love for him, and I think his government is corrupt. Those are not real elections, and I can go on and on there. He's oppressing his own people. But he's not out of his mind when he says there are foreign factors at play. The US also looking to undermine Iran. Israel also looking to undermine Iran. I mean, if you don't understand that those forces are aligned against Iran, then you don't understand foreign policy at all, and I think you guys do. Now, again, don't get me wrong, the Iranian government has so many issues that demonstrations and uprisings are perfectly understandable. And when they say things like, they calmed down. One of the guys who works for the governor, deputy governor of Tehran, said that the police, quote, calmed down the riots by inviting people to respect law and order.
Right. Yeah, that's a ridiculous statement. It is a ridiculous statement. And look, my read of what's going on right now is that yes, there is certainly a possibility that there are foreign forces at play. And what I mean by that is there is already a sense of frustration among Iranians because of the fact that the sanctions crippled their economy and continue to do so. Inflation is incredibly high. Unemployment is incredibly high. For the general public, it's about 14%. But if you look at Iranian youth, it's at about 40%. So once you start messing with people's financial well-being, that's when they, start getting more and more frustrated and angry and want to take to the streets because they might feel like they have nothing else to lose. And there is a lot of frustration, especially among the younger population in Iran toward the religious leadership. They want a more liberal society, they want more freedom, and so there is that component of this uprising. But I think that it's very possible that Saudi Arabia or other foreign players can sense that tension and sense that frustration, and they're stoking it in order to kind of encourage this type of uprising to happen.
But we're playing a dangerous game here. What I mean by we is United States and its allies, including Saudi Arabia. But honestly, I like to do constructive critique and give you an alternative. But this is another one of those problems that is very, very difficult to solve, and I don't know how it gets solved in the long run. Here's why. So even state television admits that 9 people were killed overnight, or at least 20 killed so far, and it's not because the police were inviting them to respect the law. No, the police come and crack their skulls open.
With water cannons and other weapons, yes.
And water cannons is, of course, the least of it if you've got 20 people dead in the streets. And there's further threats that they'll kill more protesters if this continues. So, okay, I want to get rid of the mullahs. I'm secular. I think the Iranian people deserve a lot better. They're one of the great history, traditions and cultures and people in the world. I don't want them being ruled by Muslim clerics or any clerics. On the other hand, you destabilize Iran. And so, yes, their leadership is saying, well, then it could be like Syria or Libya. But okay, so they're doing propaganda to save their own hide. On the other hand, it could be. It could be like Iraq, it could be like Syria. And do we really want to destabilize the Middle East to that degree? And the problem once you destabilize, perhaps even a bigger problem is, like in Iraq, like in so many of these places, hardly ever do the rational secular moderates come out winning when a massive civil war begins.
You're right. But also just keep in mind that while maybe the US, and by the way, the reason why I say maybe is because we're speculating. Obviously, we don't have the evidence in front of us to prove that Saudi Arabia or the United States or both are allied to stoke these tensions. However, what we do know is that the sanctions that were imposed on Iran over their nuclear development did cripple their economy and continue to do so. Even though we lifted those sanctions as part of that deal, it's really hard to get money into the country. So for instance, they had a massive earthquake and people in other countries wanted to send money to their relatives or to those who needed it, and the banks can't accept the money. There are certain elements of those sanctions that are still in place, right? And so people are really suffering in Iran right now, and part of the reason why is because of US policy that, in my opinion, was incredibly short-sighted. Now look, we got the deal that we wanted, but the ramifications of those sanctions are still at play, and that's leading to more instability in that part of the world.
And by the way, look, unfortunately, a lot of people are at fault here, and certainly the Iranian government too. So we lifted the sanctions, and they got Iranian money back. Trump paints it as if it was our money and Obama decided to give them our money. No, we had frozen their bank accounts, and we had gotten the whole world to work together to freeze their bank accounts to make sure they didn't make nukes. So that's why that deal was successful. Now they don't have the uranium, that deal is working. But when the money got unfrozen, did it go to the Iranian people? Of course not, the government is corrupt and they kept most of it. And that is also leading to actual real tension that is, I'm sure, a part of these demonstrations and protests as well. I don't think that they're all just Saudi stoked. Saudi Arabia can go around, like I told you earlier, they try to stoke even jihadists in the Palestinian areas and they couldn't, right? So here they could, because people are legitimately angry about the unemployment, the corruption, and the fact that this government does not represent them. I don't know how we get a liberal democracy in Iran, which I desperately want, without going through turmoil that usually gives an advantage to radicals and fundamentalists.
Right.
What you just watched was one of the videos that we do today, but we actually do a whole 2-hour show every single day. It's a podcast. You could watch it in video or listen to it as audio. You can download it, you can stream it, and you get it completely ad-free if you could become a member of the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.